Hello, got a couple in. We'll leave it a couple of minutes and then see if more people come in, and then we'll get started. Hope everyone had a good day. So whoever just came in, leave it a couple more minutes. Hi Liam. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me okay. We'll get started in 1 or 2 more minutes. I know that they wanted about 11 in for today, so I know that was on the group. Hello, Joni. Thanks, Lucia. Okay. Right, so get started. So just going to give you a brief intro as to what we're going to do today. So I'm just going to give you a background about what hypertrophy is, how it can relate to whatever injury you've got, how it can prevent future injury if you don't have one right now, and then on top of that, when you do start training with hypertrophy in mind, what you should be focusing on, and then in terms of a hierarchy of, okay, I'm now at the gym, what should I start with? Give you kind of insight in terms of, what actually is the main focus, sort of myth busting what you might think in terms of what you might have heard, but also giving a bit of background in terms of some research behind it. Okay, we've got 12 in now. Okay, great. So what is hypertrophy? So hypertrophy is like a fancier way of saying enlargement of muscle cells and muscle surface area on top of that. It's important to realize that you can't form new muscle cells, you can't build a new shoulder, but you're just increasing the size of each strand of muscle that's already there. So how can you cause this, this increase in size? So when there's an increased demand, you can change the muscle size easily, and B, it can also be stimulated by hormones and growth factors. You can increase demand quite easily, but in terms of the hormone and growth factors, there are environmental factors that you can't really change. So in terms of building muscle, you want to put your muscle under enough stress to force adaptation through increasing that demand. And your body just in general will respond to those demands, and it works the other way. So if you're sedentary, your body will mold accordingly, and vice versa. So it works both positively and negatively. Speaking negatively as well, hypertrophy of cells is a natural body response and not all strain is good. So if you're thinking about, for example, the muscles that are in the vessels that connect to the heart, arteries and veins, it could become larger due to long-standing hypertension or high blood pressure as a result of you being diabetic or obese. So there can be positive and negative physiological things that could be linked to that hypertrophy, right? So physiologically speaking, so when we're talking about when we're actually building muscle in terms of skeletal muscle, with that you want to train with that in mind. So when you train, it synthesizes more proteins, increases the size of myofilaments, aka or the strands of muscle, and increase the surface area of that muscle, increasing the size and increasing your force of contractility, so how well you can pull or push that weight, right? So now you know a background about that. You may be thinking, okay, so how does this actually relate to my injury that I have or that I could possibly get? And with that in mind, if you are injured, you're probably thinking, okay, I should rest. But it's the most important thing to do, and what we need to tell you as therapists is it's important to still train during recovery. It may seem counterintuitive to aggravate the area after injury, but doing nothing will actually be a lot worse. In terms of you thinking in terms of myths to do with building muscle, it's not just about aesthetics. It's important not to think that way. It can be intimidating for you and often people think, I don't want to look bigger, but you have to think about it mechanically instead of visually. That's the fundamentals of it. For example, if I were thinking about the rotator cuff in your shoulder, to build that muscle, it's deep lying, you can't even see it. So a lot of the muscles are like that, where it's not going to be visual, it's going to be mechanical first. So what are the benefits of hypertrophy when you already have an injury? I've gone into a lot more detail with this on one of the posts on our Instagram and Facebook, if you want to take a look at that after this. But firstly, what hypertrophy can do is reverse muscle wasting, which is also known as atrophy. That can be quite common with injuries, especially the more severe ones. And it's important when you are training, you want to retrain that muscular and nerve pathway. So what your brain is telling to your muscle, that can be solved by training with this in mind. And especially if you have a nerve issue, it could not be communicating with that muscle to contract. So with training with hypertrophy in mind, you can help resolve this. Secondly, studies show that by training to increase muscle size, it promotes growth and strength of ligaments and tendons as well, not just the muscle itself. And then with that in mind, when we're talking about prevention of injury, as I just said, when you promote growth of ligaments and tendons, then you're less likely for those ligaments and tendons to go under strain if you've built those muscles around them. And then if they are stronger, there's less chance of them breaking down due to an injury. There's studies that also demonstrate that resistance training can cause increased bone mineral content as well, and therefore can aid prevention in skeletal injuries, so fractures and things like that. So it's not just the muscles that you're building, you're just building your global strength. On top of that, it reduces the likelihood of overuse injuries that are quite common. So if you've heard of swimmer's shoulder, which is sort of like an impingement, or tennis elbow, especially with specific sport in specific motion, by resistance training you can prevent that from happening, because if you're stronger, you're going to be less likely to have that wear and tear type injury. On top of that, as therapists, by training you in this way, we can screen you to see, okay, which muscles are in balance, and it inadvertently fixes that, because if we're focusing on one side more than the other, then we can know, oh, this side needs a lot more work than the other side. And then once we kind of fix that imbalance, you're more balanced, and then less chance of getting injured due to an imbalance in those muscles. Okay, so if you have an injury, you're also thinking, at what point should I start training? I said you should start early, but it depends on whether you have a major injury or a minor injury. So for more minor injuries, such as ligament sprains or muscle strain or general aches and pains, you can always find a way to continue exercising around the injury. It's just important that you voice your concerns with us so that we can work around that. But as I just said, it's important to keep going though, keep training, especially if it's minor. We can take that load off and change the exercises accordingly. But for major injuries, so if you're looking at a complete ACL rupture and you need reconstruction surgery, or Achilles rupture, the focus should be reducing inflammation, increasing that range of motion, stiffness, and reducing pain, and then getting back to resistance training. But that can still be earlier than you think, because if we take that load off the area, we can still build muscle around that injury. Okay, so you now know that, and you're now in the gym, and you're thinking, okay, so what should I do now? You need to think about what you should focus on first, the fundamentals, and what is your main goal, what is the outcome. So we want to stress the muscle through dynamic resistance exercise, and the goal should be that you want to increase the muscle size because of all the benefits I've mentioned, but you shouldn't think of it as a performance outcome to say, okay, I want to now lift I want to lift 100 kilograms. That's not the goal. The goal is to increase the muscle size that's there. And also, you need to understand that there's no specific set way to achieve this. You may have been told, it's another myth, that, oh, this exercise is better than this, etc. It doesn't matter what exercise you do at the end of the day. The fundamentals don't change, but the exercises can. So, if you came to life thinking, okay, I want a specific exercise that's going to grow my delts, for example, then you're going about it the wrong way. Most exercises can achieve the same outcome. It just depends on how effectively you train. So when you are training, the fundamentals are, especially with an injury in mind, for you to get stronger, is you want to manipulate the training depending on, as I said, what you feel comfortable with. So it comes down to us communicating with you, and it being a trial and error to see, with that injury and that pain specifically, you just want to avoid that pain but still train and gain that adaptation at the same time. So if I give you an example, if you have a knee injury and it hurts when you put heavy load on it, and we've given you squats to do for your rehab, there's no set definition for what is heavy, right? So what could be heavy for you could be light for someone else. So the goal is to find out at what weight your threshold is. So at what point does your injury start to get irritated, and we work backwards. So what we like to do is 1 repetition max as like the standard way of scaling it. So if you were to do an exercise and you're pain-free at about 40 to 50% of that 1 rep max, say the 1 rep max is 100 kilograms for a bench press, and you're pain-free for 50 kilograms, right? but your irritation will start to happen at 60, we'll say, okay, it's now then our job to say, right, lower the weight, but increase the volume so that you can still achieve that hypertrophy, the adaptation at a lower weight. So we can always adjust accordingly. But then when you're on your own time, it's important to think about, okay, if I am in the gym, what do I need to consider first? As there's loads of variables that can change the way that you exercise. And I'll explain what I mean by, if you organize those variables into what's most important to least important, and what you should be focusing on first, what you should be focusing on last. So the first variables that you have in mind when you go to the gym is what exercise I'm going to do. Okay, so exercise selection. Secondly, the rep ranges and the load that I'm going to lift. And thirdly, the speed at which I'm going to do this. How long have I got in the gym, and in the set, how fast am I lifting this weight? So for exercise selection, as I said, it's not exercise specific. You can achieve the same amount of muscle growth of a specific muscle by doing different exercises. And this is very good when you have an injury in mind. So you can just change it to another exercise if there's pain present, find what is suitable and what isn't, but you can still gain the same results. In terms of the rep ranges and load, there's a lot of studies that say on average the best rep range is 8 to 12 reps at 70% of your 1 rep max. And that just, if you have in mind that you're not injured, that's what the average of what people are doing currently. But you have to understand that with reps and the load, there's an inverse relationship. So with hypertrophy in mind, as you increase the rep ranges, you should be decreasing the load. As you increase the load, you should decrease the rep ranges so that you aren't irritating that muscle, but still having that load adaptation response. You have to find the right balance. If you find the right balance, you'll be successful. If you don't, if you're not lifting enough, or if you're lifting too much, then that can have an adverse effect in terms of you don't grow enough if you're not lifting heavy enough, and you just going to get injured if you're lifting too heavy, or aggravate the injury even more. So the third variable, as the first things you think about, is the tempo. So the faster you lift, the more stress there is in the joint. So studies show, if you're thinking of hypertrophic outcomes, they're similar in rep durations of like half a second to 8 seconds, but less if you are going to go above 10 seconds. So it doesn't matter how fast you lift, as long as you don't lift too slowly. It's more important variables are to think about when you're lifting, other than just tempo. So the next things you need to think about are your rest periods and your technique in lifting. So rest periods can be indirectly manipulated by that rep range and that load. So the higher load, the more stress and the more rest time is needed between each exercise. So shorter rest periods can actually minimize the load lifted. So you should be resting in between for longer periods when you're thinking about building muscle. The second variable is that technique. So altering the way you lift can relieve stress on that injury. So if you were to do a deadlift, you can change that to a sumo deadlift, as just an example. By changing the angle and just the way you lift could be less painful for you depending on what injury you have. But now I'm getting into the most important things. When you think of hypertrophy, these are the most important things. The range of motion, how close you get to failure, so to fatigue, to the point where you can't lift anymore, and also the volume at which you're lifting. So how much are you lifting in that period of time? So when you have range of motion involved with an injury, there's certain ranges that can irritate that injury. So you could be more of a stretch at that end range most likely. So you only want to lift at that pain-free range. However, studies show that full range of motion compared to partial, it actually achieves larger muscle growth. So you have to balance that out. You need to make sure that you're doing enough range that you can do, but if you're struggling, do partial reps, and then over time, as you improve and get better, closer to health, increase that range over time. And when I talk about proximity to failure, so how close you can get to failure, when you get closer to that fatigue, it increases that tissue stress. So as a trainee, you can lift further from injury to alleviate pain, but lighter loads need to be taken closer to failure than heavier loads. So training further from failure, so easier, will be less likely for you to grow that muscle. So gradually increase that fatigue as your injury allows it to. Finally, the volume. So aka the dosage of training. So there's a limit to how much you can handle, especially if you're injured. You may have actually got injured through increasing that volume of exercise, right, in the first place. So it's specific to exercises that stress the injured issue when you're thinking about volume. So you should find that threshold, again, as I said, that pain threshold. If it's pain-free, then keep doing it, but you need to increase that volume eventually. So, with all that in mind, to summarize what you can do yourselves and what we need to encourage you to be doing as therapists is, firstly, experiment with different training methods to see what you can tolerate and be challenged by. So tolerance and challenge have to be balanced. And you should start by manipulating the first things I talked about. So the exercises themselves you can change, and so on from there. So the exercises themselves, the rep ranges and loads, experiment with that the rest, so such as range of motion, don't experiment with. Do as much range as you can and get as close to as failure as you can and do as much as you can within reason. And then experiment with that thresholds of pain and irritation, because if you don't get to that point where it starts to hurt, you're not going to get that adaptation that you need. So that just shows, hopefully, it shows to you the importance of building muscle when you think about injury and what you can be doing personally to improve when you are exercising. So that's it for the live. If you have any injuries, you can put that in the comments, and one of our admins will get back to you. We can have and hopefully we can book in a session for you. And also any questions about the live itself and anything you need want to be cleared a bit more, just let me know in the comments and I'll have a look. Okay. Seems like nobody's got any issues then. I'll leave it a couple of minutes for whoever's shy. Okay. Okay, looks like we're all good. Okay, thanks for coming. Hopefully you learned a couple of things and take that into whenever you're doing your own training. and hopefully we can see you in the clinic soon as well. So, goodbye. Thanks for watching.